Well, thank you, Natan. You've set a difficult precedent for our subsequent speakers. And speaking of speakers, our speaker today is Joseph B. Costello, Chairman and CEO of Think3, and a member of the Harvey Mudd class of 1974. We owe Joe a great debt of gratitude for making himself available as our speaker on less than 2 days' notice when Douglas Adams unfortunately died on Friday. Joe is highly regarded for his business acumen and bold moves in the high-tech industry. And Joe Costello is set to make Silicon Valley history again, this time at the helm of an upstart 3D design software company, Think3. Costello also serves as vice chairman of Zamba Solutions and chairman of NextNet Wireless, Barcelona Design, and Brava Brava. He's also on the boards of Calico Commerce Incorporated, Katina Networks, Saba, Simplex Solutions, and Reality Fusion. Prior to Think3, Joe played a pivotal role as president and CEO of Cadence Design Systems for more than a decade. Under his leadership, Cadence became the world's leading supplier of electronic EDA software and services and one of the top 10 highest grossing software vendors in the world. In 1997, Chief Executive Magazine named Costello the top performing CEO of all publicly traded companies in North America. And Upside Magazine included him in its Elite 100 list of top executives leading the digital revolution. Joe holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Mathematics and Physics from Harvey Mudd College from the great class of 1974, a Master's of Science degree in Physics from Yale, and a Master of Science degree in Physics from the University of California, Berkeley. Please welcome our own Joe Costello.
So I'm very honored to be here today to speak in front of this group. Obviously very strange and sad circumstances. I wish the circumstances were better. But I've learned in life that you really don't often get to control your circumstances. They kind of turn out the way they turn out. And in fact, I think Douglas Adams' books, this could be a chapter in one of his books, The Strange Circumstance Around This. Let me tell you exactly what happened so you get a flavor for it, and we'll talk about what we're going to talk about today. So on Friday afternoon, I'm actually in a video conference board meeting with this new company, Reality Fusion. And in the middle of it, I get this instant message that comes across from my administrative assistant who lives and works someplace else. And it says, Joe, there's a guy from Harvey Mudd on the phone, and he wants you to speak at Harvey Mudd on Sunday. I said, who is it? Bedford. I said, are you sure he doesn't want money? No, he wants you to speak. I said, no, that wasn't my question. Are you sure he doesn't want money? So I had a lot to do, so I didn't get around to speaking to Bedford until later that evening. And then he told me the circumstances, and he was trying to sort it out himself. And I said, sure, I'll be glad to do it. I mean, if you can find somebody who's a better person to speak, that's great. But, whatever, just tell me if that's it. I said, I'll send you an email tonight. So he did. And Saturday morning, I woke up and I have 4 kids, and I was watching one of their Little League baseball games in the morning, and I said, God, tomorrow I got to actually go give a speech to this commencement. And so I said, I better start thinking about that. See, I really am a Harvey Mudd graduate. So, what do? I start rolling through the data bank, commencement speeches I have given before. Took a while, nothing came back, right? I said, all right, that's okay. I'm a pretty good mimic, so how about commencement speeches that I have heard? One comes up. 27 years ago, approximately, I heard one commencement speech in my life. So I said, well, let me tap into that one. That was right here. It was actually the other direction, faced that way then. But I couldn't remember anything from it at all. Now that's when I actually started to feel better, because I thought, I don't think I could screw this up because, my life turned out okay. I can't remember who it was or what he said. So I don't figure I'll damage you guys too much today. So I asked Bedford if there was anything specifically he wanted. And he told me just one thing. See, I have a history. I use a lot of colorful language when I speak. And he said, you know, it'd be fine if it was just the graduates, but they got a lot of friends and families here. So kind of try to tone down your reputation for colorful language. So I said, okay, I can do that. But I've got one better on that, which is every time I use colorful language, I'll give $1,000 to the college, right? For the fund, right? Because you see, the reason I say that is because sometimes it happens. Now, here's the deal. The graduates are the ones that get to vote on it. So, you know, like when you think I owe $1,000, you know, just tip your hat, right? And I'm sure Bedford will keep track for you. See, this way, I figured Bedford won't be offended if I use colorful language. In fact, if you see him going, you know, if I get wrong, you'll know what's happening. Anyway, so I thought, what should I talk about commencement? I said, clearly this event, I mean, it's wonderful to have the family and friends here, but this is about the graduates, the folks that have spent the last 4 or more years here, or in this process of graduating. And so I said, you know, tips or hints. And I said, oh my God, think about this for a second. None of these people were born when I graduated, you know, so I don't think giving them a life stories or things that are relevant today. So I thought, let me think back to when I graduated. There's probably some of the things that I literally learned and lessons that I got from right after graduation, probably the most relevant because that's where they're headed over the next few years. Yeah, not 5 years, 10 years. In this world, things move too fast, you know, 3 or 4 years. We don't plan in startup companies for more than 2 to 3 years anymore. So something that's immediately relevant. So I'll go back to my graduation, 1974. I graduated from Harvey Mudd in math and physics. Actually, I was a math major until the very end of my junior year when, you know, they forced, at that time, I don't know, maybe it's still true, they forced you to take an applied math class to graduate in math. And in this applied math class, most of the people in it were physicists, and I kind of got intrigued by physics, and so I decided, you know what, forget it, I want to become a physicist. That looks better to me than the math. And so I scrambled to get enough units and, you know, get enough stuff so I could go to graduate school in physics. And I ended up getting accepted into Yale University. Now, leaving Harvey Mudd was this mixed feeling, kind of like the speaker before me. I really loved Harvey Mudd. I mean, not that it was all perfect and wonderful. It has its ups and downs and its moments, but, you know, really, honestly, I loved being here. It was great. I learned a tremendous amount. I grew, obviously, from an academic point of view, but probably more importantly, from a personal point of view. It was just an incredibly great time. So I had some feelings of, you know, oh, I don't really want to leave, but on the other side, this graduate school thing sounded great, because here's exactly what I thought. I'm going to Yale, and I'd heard there were going to be about 20-some people in the physics graduate school class, and I thought, this is Harvey Mudd on steroids. You know, it's going to be like the same thing, but better, because it's going to be just the people who are interested in physics, and it's going to be the same kind of really incredible environment. Bond with those people, do these cool things, have amazing professors that will help you learn and move forward. I was jazzed. I couldn't wait to get there. So, you know, waited all summer, go to Yale, show up. 2 days into this, I was thinking, this is a bad dream. Something went wrong with this experiment, badly wrong with this experiment. First of all, the people there seemed a tad bit hostile, was my response to this. Now, I say this to all of you because the world will be different when you go to some of these other places, whether it's universities for graduate school or places to work or other things. You're not going to find quite the same environment. So people weren't. It wasn't the same kind of all for one, one for all spirit. That was the first thing I noticed. There wasn't that collegiality. That was number one. Number two, you know, I thought universities and colleges were about teaching stuff. Not Yale, at least not in graduate school. You know, some of you will really understand. I know that Professor Halliwell will understand this. I took quantum electrodynamics, was one of the classes that we had to take right off the bat. And the professor, who I will not name because he's still alive and relatively famous, would get up and read from the quantum electrodynamics textbook, page after page, to the class. Now, I mean, if you read Moby Dick, that would be boring. But I'm telling you, quantum electrodynamics, this is like the worst thing you could ever read. So I'm stunned with this. And now the third thing that happened that was really shocking to me was after about a week, I realized I was stupid. That actually, and then it turned after week number 2, I wasn't stupid, actually. I wasn't as stupid as I was really pissed off at Harvey Mudd. One take. Couldn't help it, because that was the truth. I was really upset. I couldn't understand anything they were saying in any of these classes anymore after 1 week. They had gone through review in like 2 hours of what you were supposed to have known in undergraduate school. I didn't know anything of what they were talking about anymore. I was completely lost. Might as well have been on another planet completely. So I went to the dean of the graduate school, and I said, there's been a terrible mistake. I am not prepared. This is the Harvey Mudd way, you know? I'm not prepared. I've got a plan, though, a solution. I'll go into a special study situation where, you know, I'll catch up. Let me go do some undergraduate classes. I mapped it all out, what I could do to catch up and make good on this whole thing. He said, absolutely not. Rules are rules. You will take the class along with everybody else. I said, but it's worthless. I don't know what they're talking about. You know, I'm just sitting there like a moron. You will do it. Okay, I'm going to do it. So I had to go to another plan B, plan C now, about what I'm going to do. So actually, I went off in a hole, sat in the library, and I started reading. Now, along the way, I figured, I've got to find some friends. There's got to be people here that have the same inner desires, the kinds of people that were at Harvey Mudd. I can't believe that MIT and Caltech and all these schools killed all that spirit in all these people. There's got to be someone that's alive and got some positive neurons firing here. And the way I actually found it was, it turns out that quantum electrodynamics class was the key to my breakthrough. Because what happened, it was so god-awful boring, even the automatons in our class couldn't stand going anymore. So one day, this famous professor shows up and no one attends class. Well, he wasn't happy. He went to the dean. He said, this is an outrage that these young whippersnappers won't come to my class and listen to me read from the text. And so he said, I'm not coming anymore. So the dean got us all together and said, this is outrage, you know, got to show up. Aha! I knew this was my moment. So I organized all the students. After it was all over, they're all worried. I said, wait. I organized them. I put together a schedule. I said, someone just has to show up, not everybody. And so I put together an elaborate schedule for the rest of the year about who would show up when and how we would trade information with one another about what was going on. And, you know, if it worked for one class, it kind of works for multiple classes. So I became kind of a hub, you know, of information. It's like the web before the web existed. So we got things going, and that started. I started to find some people and, you know, form some relationships, and things started to happen. I will say that I never, ever did attend any other class the rest of the year except for quantum electrodynamics when it was my turn. Because I had my hub, I had my people, and I had to go study and really figure out what was going on. And the other thing, I found a professor. I could see one of these guys had a different little bit of a light, and I found a professor of experimental physics that I fell in love with, and we formed a relationship and did some pretty neat things. So my point about this is it isn't going to be the same. You know, it really isn't. It's not going to look the same or feel the same. There's going to be some big differences. But the spirit and the heart and the things that you've learned here working together, they are there in people. And you can find it. And you can make that happen. It's true with fellow students and peers and faculty or co-workers or bosses. You'll find it. Because I think everybody yearns for a lot of the experience that is created here at Harvey Mudd College. It really, really indeed is true. Now, as it turns out, at the end of that year, you take a bunch of exams at Yale. At the end of the year, at midterm you take exams, at the end of the year you take exams, and they don't tell you the answer about how you did until the summer. So I left and went out to the West Coast to San Francisco because I had a girlfriend who was from Scripps. You know, when I came back actually today, I was like tearing. I was wondering if they had maybe, you know, like how those stadiums get named. I was wondering if Scripps had become like Compact College or something like that. But it still is, I think, Scripps. But anyway, so so I had this girlfriend and went out to the West Coast. And in the summer, I get this letter from Yale. You know, and I open it up, very official looking. I'm thinking, uh-oh. And it says inside, it goes, geez, at the end of the first year, the 2 students that get the top scores on the exams, we give an honorary master's degree. And you were one of them. And I'm like, holy cow. So I wrote back really quickly. I said, thank you very much. That's really quite an honor, and I won't be returning. Because, you know, my girlfriend was in San Francisco, and so I said, in Yale, yuck. You know, so I enrolled quickly in Berkeley. So I go to University of California, Berkeley. You know, it's bigger, you know, different. You know, I think maybe West Coast thing versus East Coast thing. 2 days into it, I went, uh-oh. It wasn't the coast thing. It was graduate school. You know, basically graduate school is different. So I'm going to have to make my way in a kind of a different way. And so I started down that path. Now, along the way, I also realized I wanted to be a theoretical physicist, and along the way, I quickly realized it wasn't going to happen. This is 1975. No jobs for theoretical physicists, hardly any jobs for physicists, so experimental was going to have to be my game. I walked into the first 3 labs of people who would pay me any money to be their slave, and they're banks of electronics. They wanted electronic slaves. I don't know anything about electronics, so again, I had to come up with a plan. So I got a summer job down in Silicon Valley. I was kind of Silicon Valley then. It was a little bit different. And actually, the summer job lasted about 18 months because it was really cool. This was when the microprocessor was invented and things were going wild, and so I stayed a little bit extra. Now, along the way, another lesson I got in life. In fact, this one is the one that was probably the most important lesson of my entire life. I might have had some sense about it before I could fully articulate it and see it, but this was it. This is the most riveting single lesson that I can remember during this time post Harvey Mudd. I was at Berkeley, and by the way, I spent a long time. I spent 11 years going to college and graduate school before I bowed out. And by the way, as you know from my background, didn't get a PhD ever. So spent a lot of time fooling around, and so I had a lot of interests. And during this time, I would pursue things that interested me. So this is the time, somewhere in those 70s, that the modern hang glider was invented. And I thought the modern hang glider was one of the coolest things you had ever seen. I mean, I'd had dreams about flying and things, and this is as close as a human's ever going to get to flying, is a hang glider. And so I had to do that. That seemed like it was really a worthy thing for a graduate student in physics to do. So I had to find a way. Unfortunately, I was also poverty-stricken, so I couldn't afford one. And the only place they'd let you go hang glide was a place called Dillon Beach in Northern California. And to go and rent the kite, you had to have gone through ground school first. All right, whatever, right? So I go do ground school. And the deal in ground school, this is, by the way, there's a subtitle to this message, which is, the big lessons in life happen when you least expect them. Sometimes you go for them, you go read the text or see the person that's not there, but they often happen at the most unexpected time. So I'm going to go to hang gliding ground school. This is like one of these things, 5 courses, 3 hours every Tuesday night for 5 weeks. So we go through the first 4 weeks. The 5th course, walk in, and the instructor says, listen, I want you to listen up. It's important. He said the first 4 courses were complete bullshit. Had to, that's what he said. So he said, I want you to be very clear, they were worthless. They were totally meaningless. They were complete fodder. He said, the reason that we have those 4 courses is because we knew you wouldn't pay us $100 for one night. So this is the course you need to listen to. So this is it. Forget everything else. This is the one. He said, now this one tonight is about landing. So he goes, look, bottom line with the modern hang glider, and by the way, this guy had won, he was the championship hang glider for the United States at the time. He was pretty good. He goes, here's the deal. Hang gliders now are pretty darn good, these modern hang gliders. So when you're flapping around up there flying, he goes, the worst flight up there while you're flying is pretty darn good if you have a good landing. He said, but you know what? The best flight, if you have a crummy landing, you just had a bad flight. So he said, hang gliding is actually, in the end, all about landing. So he said, now listen up. This is really important. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about hang gliding landing in the next 5 minutes. So this kind of intrigued me, I'm kind of a scientist engineer type, right? So I got out my watch. I check it out. Let's see what he can do in 5 minutes. So I can't remember the first part of his little lesson on hang gliding because it didn't make any sense. So I was lost. When you're lost, you don't remember, right? But I started to catch up. Where I started to follow him, he was talking about airplane accidents and how the FAA records everything about airplane accidents, and we know that from all the crashes that you read in the paper. But he was saying that there are more small plane crashes than big plane crashes by far, so they have a lot more data on those small plane crashes. And he was talking about the results, and he goes, I want you to understand this. Here are the results. Now I won't get this exactly right, but before I do that, first of all, I know we're going to get some yeses. How many people out here are pilots, private pilots? We got a few, any base people here? A few people. So I've flown in, I'm not a private pilot myself, but I've flown in private planes, and one of the things in flying with private pilots has always been true is that they have this saying about you're always supposed to be looking for where you would land if there's a problem. Kind of always scanning the horizon, right? That you're always looking, if there's a problem, I'd go over there. And the other thing about private pilots, my experience, is, I'm talking about the small plane kind, they tend to be kind of an anal lot, They get everything just so. They have those checklists they go through thoroughly. And when you pile into one of those small planes, right, you get into one of those little planes, you're kind of happy that they're that way because they're kind of rinky-dink operations, right? And so you're happy this guy is, checking all the boxes off like that. So you think about this. You've got these kind of anal people, right, who have a rule that they're supposed to be scanning all the time to find where they're supposed to land. So on that backdrop, this guy's giving the statistics. He says, listen, here's the statistics. I won't get it right, but you'll get the flavor because I can't remember the exact numbers. He said, here's the deal. When they do these FAA analyses of planes crashing, here's the bottom line. They kind of figure where was the plane approximately when the incident happened, like the propeller fell off or a duck hit it or something, ran out of gas, stuff like that. The incident, height, speed, weather conditions, and you can kind of build a map of where potentially the plane could end up. So you build a map of all possible outcomes, basically, from thing that happened, incident, and then where could it end up. And when you draw that map, you will find that approximately 75% of the all possible spots where they can end up, over all accidents, end up in a non-fatal situation. Not necessarily good, never good when a thing happens up there, right? But non-fatal. When you actually look at the results, only about 25% of all people survive. Now think about that for a second. What that says, I know all the Harvey people got this already done in their head, but what that says is that at the point of the incident, when the duck hit your propeller, if you blindfolded all of these people, and you could just tell them, and they just randomly went down, and you could tell them, all right, nose up right now, because you're about to hit the ground, they would do about 2.5, 3 times better than they do with their eyes open. Now that's a disturbing fact about this anal lot of people who are trained to think about where they're going to end up. So this was his intro to this thing. He says, so now listen, guys. The FAA is not the first group that ever studied this. The military studied this in World War II, because the same thing happened with pilots in World War II that had problems. He said, here's the deal. They've actually even got a name for this. He said, the name for the syndrome is called negative target fixation. And so here's how it works. Clunk. The duck hits your propeller. You run out of steam. You're going down. Thank God, though, you're a good guy. You've been checking everything out. You know exactly where you should put it down, kind of right over there. You look over there. Everything's hunky-dory. Still looks good. The only thing that could possibly be a problem is that large utility pole right in the middle of the field. Just don't hit that large utility pole. Don't hit the large utility pole. Do not hit the large utility pole. Whack! He said that's what happened. That's negative target fixation. And he said, it's true. And it'll happen to you, too. And he said, this is serious stuff. He said, I'm telling you, this is it. This is your 5 minutes on how to land a hang glider. He said, I want to give you the rules now. The rules are just like this. He said, I'm not a Pollyanna about this stuff either. Landing a hang glider is dangerous stuff. And here's the deal. Do your inventory. When you got to go down, do your inventory. Look at every possible problem. There's trees, power poles, big bodies of water. He goes, you don't want to land hang gliders back then in bodies of water. You drown. He goes, that's not good. Crevasses, ravines. He said, put everything in there. Ghosts, alligators, your paranoia. Throw it all in. Eliminate all those as possibilities for landing. And after you're done with your inventory of all the bad stuff, pick, he said, we'll use it hypothetically, the open field. Right? So that's your choice. He says, as soon as you've done your negative inventory, you've wiped out all that stuff, and you've got the open field, he said, then you do one thing. Hit the open field. Hit the open field. Hit the open field. Hit the open field. You've just had a great landing and a wonderful hang gliding session. He stopped and he walked out of the classroom. We're all there kind of like this, like a minute goes by, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Guy never came back. Now this is Berkeley in, sometime in the 70s. Performance theater, I don't know, what was going on. Slowly, after about a half hour, we all wandered away. But I couldn't get this out of my mind, and I hope you won't get it out of your mind after this talk today. Because I started looking at everything around the same way. I happened to go that night and watch some television. I'm listening to people talking on television. It's like everything on television. Everything. The news, news magazines, sitcoms, dramas. They're all about negative target fixation. They really are. Sit and watch. I'd be in a restaurant or cafe in Berkeley listening, overhearing conversations at the next table. Negative target fixation. Start watching. 90% of the human condition is negative target fixation. People are spending all their time talking about it. Now, by the way, it's not bad if they're doing the inventory to get rid of it and then fixate on the positive thing, the open field, and go for it. But no, they just continue to dwell on the negative, the negative, the negative, over and over and over and over again until it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I started watching the people around me. My lab mate in graduate school, he had this girlfriend, right? And I started listening. This is the best girlfriend he'd ever had in his life. It was all working really, really great. There was only one possible thing. He was really afraid that she might cheat on him. Just deadly afraid that she might cheat on him, might cheat on him, might cheat on him, might cheat on him. You know the end of the story. I had this other friend who was a schemer. He always had a scheme, always had some scheme going, right? This one, he had this new scheme. It sounded pretty good. There was only one thing that could stop him from having this scheme work out. Just one thing, just one thing. That happened to him. Watch it. Start watching around you. Everything around you. People spend 90% of their time on negative target fixation. They really do. And they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Honest to God. Now, there's other examples of this. I can give you many, many examples in life. Simple ones. I'll give you one example. Golf is a great example. Now, golf, if you're going to hit a 150-yard thing, and you've played a few times, 150 yards isn't a big deal, unless you put a body of water between you and the 150-yard thing. And an unbelievable number of people put the ball in the body of water. Now, why do you think that is? Because they're thinking about the body of water instead of the green grass on the other side of the body of water. No joke. Here's another one, which is statistically true. If you ever watch soccer or football, European football players, in amateur, I don't know how true it is in professional, in amateur leagues, the percentage of time, goalie alone with a striker coming at him one-on-one, that's a huge area of net to hit, right? The percentage of time people actually score there is far lower than the size of the goalie versus the size of the net. Far, far lower. Why is that? Because they're worried about the goalie, not the open net, the open net, the open net. I will tell you, as you walk out of Harvey Mudd with all the skills and capabilities that you have, because you have some tremendous ones, really some tremendous ones, the biggest thing that will stop you in life is negative target fixation. And I'm not a Pollyanna person. People who know me, have been around me, worked with me, know that. I do pretty good inventories of all the possibilities. Some would even call me, excessive about some of those things. But once you've done it and you've found the open field, I am obsessive about that. I can get incredibly focused on that open field, what I often call the positive end in mind. And that's your job, because if you take this group of people with the skills and the brain power that you have got, and you focus on some positive ends in mind, the world will not be the same. I guarantee it. Now, one last thing I want to say here. I did say I spent a long time in school, from 1970 to somewhere like 1981. And again, I ended up with a couple of master's degrees, which anybody who knows those are the booby prize, right? Because I never got a PhD. I was working for a long time on that PhD. And I chose at a certain point to leave, to not finish my PhD. It didn't seem right. I actually went around and asked everybody, literally maybe 30 people I'd worked with, parents, relatives, etc., should I stick it out another 2 or 3 years and finish my PhD? To a person, must have been 30 or 40 people to zero, said, you got to stick it out after this incredible long investment, stay with it, get that PhD. And I then said, fine, I quit the very next day. Now, I don't say that in a flippant way. I really learned a lot from discussing it with all those different people. But it became very clear in those discussions that who I was and what my heart and soul was about, what my passion was about, really was something different. And to waste another 2, 3 years of my life for something that wasn't me was really, really silly. You've got to do what you're passionate about and what your heart and soul is truly in, no matter how logical it is to do something else. Now, in the process, it's sometimes difficult. During that time, my father was an executive in General Motors. He rose to be the head of purchasing at General Motors. He was the Undersecretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. He was a big, had an important job, etc. And he thought I was a worthless toad. I mean, he really, seriously, he couldn't believe, 11 years in school, and he can't even cough up a degree other than these booby prizes. He thought I was crazy, a lotus eater, wasn't getting there, He really, really and truly did. So one thing I will say to the friends and relatives of Harvey Mudd people, bear with us, It's not always a linear path. Some people it will be, but it's not always a linear path to the thing that is in your heart and soul. It sometimes takes a little time to find the exact route and the way through. And by the way, in the end, before my father died, I think he did get it. He once called me. He wasn't the most expressive person, but he called me one day and he said, I was talking to someone from Silicon Valley the other day, and he said, oh, you must be Joe Costello's father. Now, I know, he wasn't able to say, and boy, that made me proud, but I knew he really, really was. So, bear with us. We won't all take that linear path. I'll end by saying to you guys, really, you truly are lucky. Life is an incredible miracle. In general, it's incredibly beautiful and rich. Not to say it doesn't have its ups and downs, but you can make it what you want, especially people like you. You have incredible backgrounds. You have incredible talent, brain, perseverance. You have Harvey Mudd now behind you, which I think is an invaluable asset to anything you want to do. So go out and make the most of it. You really, really can change the world. Follow your heart. Really, really and truly follow your heart. And remember, hit the open field.
Having heard Joe speak before, I figured that was good for at least $10,000. You tried too hard, Joe. You've given us a very inspiring message. I'm just wondering what you could have done with a little preparation. But I think all of us will remember for a very long time the notion of hitting the open field. A very valuable message, and we thank you very much.